The months that I've spent out of government now have given me time to look back at how the free world has changed in the last decade. And between them, President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher have really rewritten the agenda. The old truths were found to be not so true and quite faulty. 10 years on now, the new agenda ensures a smaller and a realistic role for government, and above all, a much greater role for individual freedom in every corner of the world that has been touched by the Reagan-Thatcher Revolution.
Happy? Yeah, good. Okay. Mr. Weinberger, sir, you obviously met Mrs. Thatcher a number of times during your years in the administration, particularly when she came to the Pentagon. What was your experience of those visits?
Well, the visit that she made to the Pentagon, I think, revealed several characteristics about the Prime Minister. She has mastered her brief thoroughly. She was extremely interested, not just in the broad general questions of strategy and the regaining strength that we were experiencing in the United States, but she was very interested in and very knowledgeable about the details of weapon systems and very small matters connected with individual weapons and the cooperative programs we had with Britain. I remember one of her aides trying to dissuade her from spending so much time on the details of these matters, and she promptly froze him and told him that she was not only interested in the details, but they were the most important part, and she was very good at it.
When we come to the crucial question in terms of Mrs. Thatcher's 10 years in office of the Falklands conflict, you are obviously closely involved in that because we relied very heavily on American assistance. What's your assessment of how much what was achieved there was due to her?
Oh, I think almost all of it was really a personal triumph for Mrs. Thatcher. She exhibited the very best qualities of leadership at that time. She made a very memorable statement right at the beginning. She said, "The possibility of defeat simply does not exist." And her military chiefs and ours in the Pentagon both felt that there was no possibility of a military success. It was clearly impossible. Here was the situation that required an invasion, the assault of a defended island, which is one of the most difficult military operations in any event, at the end of an 8,000-mile logistical chain with only one small base in between, and no real preparation for that kind of thing. And yet, in the face of all of this adverse technical military advice, she felt correctly that the situation, which was naked military aggression by a very corrupt, bankrupt military dictatorship in Argentina, required aggressive action, and she took it. And because of her determination, because of her insistence that that had to be done, it was done. And it was also a great triumph for the British military. They performed extraordinarily well in the field. We were able to help in a small way in the sense of providing a very substantial amount of the specific military materiel that the British forces required. Our principal contribution was in doing it very, very rapidly. Normally, this sort of request for material assistance, foreign military aid, that sort of thing, runs through about 15 inboxes or in trays in the Pentagon, and it takes a very long time. What we did was cut out all of that. These requests came directly to my desk, and most of them were turned around and filled within 24 hours. One, I think we filled within 7 hours, and I'm told this was more rapidly than we were able to do that even in World War II. So that was a part of the assistance that we gave, but the real winning of the war, so to speak, was her determination, her tremendous, inspiring leadership, really, and the great fighting qualities of the British military forces.
Was it a difficult decision for the American administration to make, to decide to back Britain in a practical way?
Well, not in the final analysis. There were other voices raised. There were people who were worried about whether or not our support of Britain in a war against a Latin American nation would hurt us within our own hemisphere. There were others who wanted to try to negotiate and settle it without all of the indignities and problems of an actual armed conflict. President listened to all of those voices, but he made a very clear decision, and a correct one, because essentially what was involved here was not whether or not we were going to support a European power against a Latin American power, but whether we were going to encourage and support, either by our inaction, our so-called neutrality, or our failure to support Britain, whether we were going to encourage corrupt military dictators to launch unprovoked aggression. And stated in those terms, the answer was quite clear. Also, Britain was our oldest and closest ally, and we were a part of NATO. And an attack on any one member of NATO is an attack on all the members. So there really wasn't ever any doubt about it, but there were other voices raised within the administration, yes.
It's just a sentence or two to get us into the section.
Okay, I'm wrong.
Don't know.
So if you just tell me, please, a little bit about how the Falklands conflict was viewed by the American administration, starting with the words the Falklands conflict.
Well, of course, the Falklands problem was also a source of some dissent within the administration. There were other voices raised. The president listened to all of these. These other voices were trying to make the point that an American support of European power, so to speak, in a war with a Latin American power would be very bad for all of our relationships in our own hemisphere. But the president paid no attention to that.
That's splendid. And just on, so we get into the start of this section, we were talking about the Falklands as exemplifying Mrs. Thatcher's own determination. If we do the same for that.
Well, of course, the Falklands represented, I thought, Mrs. Thatcher's leadership qualities at their very finest. She was inspiring, she was determined, and she was very forceful, and she never wavered for a moment. She said the possibility of defeat simply does not exist.
That is standby.
I think I'm right in saying that it's not just in military matters. You've seen this characteristic of Mrs. Thatcher.
Of course, the Prime Minister showed similar resolution in dealing with economic matters. Her struggles within the European community are well known. She was not the typical politician compromising at the lowest level at which you could seek agreement, but she insisted on the proper amount for Britain to have to pay and no more. And then at Williamsburg, at the summit with President Reagan, she stood very strongly by him and secured passage of a number of resolutions that previous economic summits had not been able to agree upon or to pass. And that was an important part of setting the course for the economic policy for the summit nations.
That's excellent. Now, if we move on to the embassy dinner in 1985, the question of the second term, so we're back to discussing the personal relationship again. And so I'd ask you whether, in the time that you were in the administration and observing this relationship between these two leaders, whether you saw it change in any way. Did it grow and develop?
Well, I think that the relationship really remained very warm throughout the president's entire 8 years. I think there were, obviously, Mrs. Thatcher was delighted with the president's re-election in 1984, and that was expressed very nicely in the embassy dinner that was given when Mrs. Thatcher came to pay another of her visits to Washington. The president took the rather unusual step of attending that dinner in the British embassy, and the toasts and the atmosphere was extraordinarily warm and pleasant and happy. The president had just come from an electoral triumph. Mrs. Thatcher had had one earlier, and it was a splendid evening in every way.
Of course, Mrs. Thatcher is not the only British minister that you've had dealings with. Particularly at the Pentagon, you've had to deal with British defence ministers. Would you care to reflect on particularly on the question of SDI, which at some time caused some discussion between Britain and the United States?
Well, I think the Prime Minister was very interested in strategic defense initiative of the President's. One of the things, of course, where we had direct relationship with the United Kingdom on that was that we were seeking to have contracts and agreements signed with a number of the NATO nations to help out and do some of the research work necessary to bring that splendid concept to deployment. And we had relationships and dealings with one of Mrs. Thatcher's defense ministers, Michael Heseltine, who's a good personal friend. And in that discussion why Mr. Heseltine was insisting on some guarantees that we were not really able to make. He wanted those guarantees before any agreement was signed. Essentially what he wanted was a promise that we would give to England $1 billion of work in connection with the Strategic Defense Initiative. And that was not only quite impossible based upon our whole system of having to wait for congressional appropriations, but not really knowing what sort of contracts could be bid upon or any of the other imponderables. This was not an allocation of money program, it was a research program. His successor, George Younger, who was a splendid defense minister, understood this fully, as did Mrs. Thatcher, and we signed an agreement that provided essentially that both countries would work together in the research to do all we could to develop strategic defense as quickly as possible. And we have let several contracts to British firms and British institutions, as we have with other countries.
That's splendid. If we could, given that I have a picture of Mr. Heseltine arriving at the Pentagon to meet you, do you think we could start with a sentence, and again, you just need to repeat a sentence, so saying, I had other visitors, other British visitors at the Pentagon, or something like that. We'll just get us into that picture.
Of course, we had other visitors at the Pentagon, too. One of Mrs. Thatcher's defense ministers, Michael Heseltine, came to the Pentagon when we were discussing the terms of an agreement under which we would work together with Britain to help develop the Strategic Defense Initiative.
That's splendid.
Okay, stand by. Tape's rolling.
In 1984, the Oxford Union had been kind enough to invite me to a debate, and I was foolish enough to accept.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I can hear you thumbing through your paper. I'm sorry.
Lends a note of realism to the whole thing. In 1984, the Oxford Union was kind enough to invite me to a debate, and I was foolish enough to accept.
You have some quite interesting things to say about your relationship, your friendship with Mrs. Thatcher outside the normal political context. What's the best example of that?
Of course, I remember very well Mrs. Thatcher's personal warmth and understanding. I had been foolish enough to accept an invitation to a debate at the Oxford Union where the subject was resolved there's no moral difference between the foreign policy of the United States and the USSR. And our embassy had strongly urged that I not participate in a debate of that kind. I was on my feet about 5 minutes at the debate before I realized that the embassy was absolutely right. But fortunately, we did have more students agree with the position we were presenting than the position presented by Professor Thompson, which was in effect that there was no moral difference between the two foreign policies. I didn't find out about the actual result until quite a lot later, matter of fact, the next morning, because I had flown over from the United States in the morning of the debate and been pretty busy all day, and after I had finished the debate, went back to my hotel in London. The telephone rang early in the morning, and Mrs. Thatcher was on the line to congratulate me on having won and to express very strongly her appreciation for the fact that the debate had been presented in such a way that we did win. I thought that was a very warm and friendly and a delightful thing for her to do.
Right, and the final section of the interview is on after your resignation. We have pictures just of that, which would give us 10 seconds pictures of the resignation, and then we would have pictures of you going to Buckingham Palace. So, would you care to reflect a little bit on your contacts with Mrs. Thatcher after you resigned from the administration?
Well, of course, after I left office and resigned the position of Secretary of Defense, Mrs. Thatcher and the British government, Her Majesty, were all extraordinarily kind and awarded me an honorary knighthood. And Mrs. Thatcher was particularly warm and nice during that period to my wife and to me. Gave a very nice dinner at Downing Street and made the whole event one of the most memorable in my career. When Mrs. Thatcher came to Washington to say goodbye to President Reagan last November, you could just see the warmth of their friendship. It radiated from every event that was held. And the words that they spoke were really true to the principles that had guided them both in government for almost a decade. At the end of the Reagan presidency, the force of what they said really rested on their record of achievement. I'd known Mrs. Thatcher since before she became Prime Minister, even before she became leader of her party, and greatly admired her. I'm glad to count her as a personal friend. And I've always been struck by her really great grasp of the facts and the strength of her convictions. She was one of the very first to realize that the conventional political wisdom of the 70s not only wasn't working, but wasn't very wise, and that we needed a major and a vital change of approach, acceptance of the limitations of government, and a determination not to add to the tasks that government performs rather badly anyway, and a determination to free people, to realize all the very best that is in them.
So, do you think we could go to the top? There was a slight stumble.
Stand by.
Oh, no, yes.
On this one,
This is the first time we will see.
This is the first time we'll see it. Okay. Stand by, and I'm rolling.
I'd known Margaret Thatcher since before she became Prime Minister, even before she became leader of her party, and admired her tremendously, and I'm very glad also to count her as a personal friend. And I've always been struck by her grasp of the facts and the strength of her convictions. She was one of the very first to realize that the conventional political wisdom of the 70s wasn't working and really wasn't very wise, and that we needed a major and a vital change of approach. We needed to accept the limitations of government, and we needed to have a determination not to add to the tasks that government performs rather badly anyway, and a determination to free people to realize all the very best that is in them. Of course, Mrs. Thatcher didn't always share the same views or agree with all the things that we did here. She really wasn't at all pleased with the action that we felt we had to take in Grenada. She felt that she hadn't been consulted early enough, and she strongly urged against a military attack. We had different views. We had been urged by all the neighboring Caribbean islands that military action was the only solution to the anarchy prevailing there. The Queen's representatives was in jail. We had 1,000 American students in the medical school that we were afraid would become hostages. And we knew really we had no alternative, and that basically was the cause of the disagreement. But then, of course, there was agreement. There was Libya. We had to call on Mrs. Thatcher's help, and she didn't hesitate for a moment. She gave us permission immediately to use our bombers that were located in Lakenheath and Mildenhall. It carried a high political risk for her. She had a lot of criticism, but she didn't waver a moment. President Mitterrand, unfortunately, was another matter. He refused even to let us transit French airspace. That added 1,400 miles and 5 nighttime refuelings to what was already a very difficult and a dangerous mission. But we were determined to succeed, and our aerial attack on Tripoli was to demonstrate that the proven use of terrorism by Libya would in the future bear a very high cost for them, and we accomplished that. We were very grateful to Mrs. Thatcher for her help and her understanding in that critical situation. And even though the
Sorry, Mike, can we just, roll.
Well, even though the Reagan years are over now, I think our relationship with Britain will continue to be as strong as ever. I certainly hope so. I think it's needed. It is a special relationship indeed, and one that was emphasized when Mrs. Thatcher was the first head of government to come and talk with George Bush after his election. It may not right now be the close personal feeling that she had with President Reagan, and I don't think there'll be any lessening, however, of the warmth of the relationship between our two countries. Both leaders know how very important that is. In the months that I've spent out of government, that's given me some time to look back at how the free world has changed. Between then, I think we'll start that one over. In the months that I've spent out of government now, that's given me an opportunity to look back at how the free world has changed in the last decade. Between the two of them, President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher, they've really rewritten the world's agenda. The old truths were found to be faulty. 10 years on now, the new agenda ensures a smaller, I think, and a more realistic role for government. Above all, a much greater role for individual freedom in every corner of the world touched by the Reagan-Thatcher Revolution.
Right. Would you mind if we did that one more time?
One more time?
Perhaps taking it a little bit, since it's what we're ending on.
All right.
Perhaps a little bit more slowly.
All right. In In the months that I've spent out of government, that's given me time to look back at how the free world has changed in this last decade. Between them, President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher have really rewritten the agenda. The old truths were found to be faulty and not very true. And 10 years on now, the new agenda ensures a smaller and a realistic role for government. And above all, it ensures a much greater role for individual freedom, really in every corner of the world that is touched by the Reagan-Thatcher Revolution.
Splendid. Just one thing, I need to say, how long did Mr. Weinberger look into the lens after we finished? Because we're going straight into the other piece.
You're going to cut or you're going to do it?
Well, a mix of some sort.
It's a bit quick. It's a bit abrupt, yeah.
Right.
I'm terribly sorry, we'd have to do it one more time.
All right.
If you could just keep looking at the camera
Yeah.
for a good 5 seconds after you finish,
All right,
it enables us to come out of the piece cleanly.
I will count. Very good.
Right.
The months that I've spent out of government now have given me time to look back at how the free world has changed in the last decade. And between them, President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher have really rewritten the agenda. The old truths were found to be not so true and quite faulty. 10 years on now, the new agenda ensures a smaller and a realistic role for government, and above all, a much greater role for individual freedom in every corner of the world that has been touched by the Reagan-Thatcher Revolution.
Very good. Absolutely splendid.
All right,
Good.
very good.
Now,
Now all we got to do is dismantle all this stuff.
and if you just bear with us.
interruption.
This is one board that I get a commission on. Right?
What are we supposed to do?
Just have a look at the photographs in the corner of the letter, if you wouldn't mind.
How about the Marshal's baton from Pakistan?
Well,
All right.
Yeah, and you all just go ahead and chat about it.
Yeah.
You got them.
Can't remember what year these were, when, which was, the one was the one visit to the Pentagon, and the others are posed portrait. But she came to the Pentagon twice, in '81 and '83, I think. And then this is the letter when we
Departed
wound up.
office.
Mhm. When we wound
Right.
up.
She's a very impressive lady.
Oh,
I
yes,
really
yeah.
enjoyed her visits to the Pentagon.
She did indeed.
We
The
had the
honors parade we had for her.
Had
And
the
they had
full
the
honors
first time
parade.
she came, they had the honors parade in the White House. But the second time she came, we had the honors parade in the Pentagon.
we had the drum and fife corps and
Ah, yes.
all of the pomp and circumstance. It was very
Right.
impressive.
All the revolutionary uniform.
A bit like making a movie. Slideshow.
I've never made very many movies in my life. You have to understand.